Welcome, curious minds, to AI History of Western Philosophy. I'm genuinely excited to embark with you today on what promises to be, well, an incredibly insightful intellectual journey. Our mission in this episode is to conduct a kind of diagnostic deep dive right into the very beginnings of Western philosophy. We're going to explore a surprising argument presented in our research that right at its foundational moments, Western thought might have experienced what's been called a foundational repression.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a pretty big claim.
Yeah.
And this isn't just some abstract idea. It suggests that Western philosophy has harbored this persistent, almost unconscious, desire for monarchia.
Monarchia, yeah.
A deep-seated craving for a single ruling principle, a kind of philosophical king presiding over everything. And we're not just staying in the ancient world. We'll be tracing this conceptual lineage, this intellectual DNA, you could say, all the way from early Greek medical and political theories. Well, right through to the sharp critical thought of the 20th century.
And what's truly fascinating about this approach, I think, is that it moves beyond just a simple historical survey, just facts and dates. Today's analysis, as revealed in the texts we've consulted, it's built on tracing a very specific and often overlooked conceptual lineage.
Okay.
We'll introduce you to Alcmaeon of Croton, a pioneering pre-Socratic figure from the 5th century BCE, and his radical concept of isonomia.
Isonomia.
Think of isonomia as meaning equal rule, or maybe a dynamic equilibrium, a model of distributed, non-hierarchical order.
Right, so not top-down.
Exactly. And our research suggests this model was profoundly marginalized, almost pushed aside, really. Pushed aside in favor of what we're calling monarchic principles, those hierarchical forces that ultimately ascended and came to define so much of Western thought. And this entire interpretation, which our sources actually term a Europanalytic diagnosis.
Europanalytic. Oh, hey, that sounds intriguing.
It is. It originates from the groundbreaking work of the 20th century French philosopher François Wahl, who, armed with psychoanalytic insights, dared to apply them to the history of ideas itself, which is quite a move.
Psychoanalysis on philosophy itself. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So our task today, for you, the listener, is to uncover this sidelined paradigm, this isonomia, trace its, well, arguably deliberate repression through the works of major philosophical figures, Plato, Aristotle, and so on, and then use Wahl's framework, this Europanalyse, to diagnose this sweeping historical trajectory. Ultimately, it's about understanding why Western thought developed the specific way it did, and perhaps even more crucially, what profound intellectual possibilities it might have inadvertently lost or, suppressed along the way.
And when you consider those lost possibilities, that's where things get truly captivating, isn't it? Let's journey back in time, all the way to the turn of the 5th century BCE. Let's introduce you properly to Alcmaeon of Croton. This isn't just another name from an old history book. He's the truly pivotal figure, almost foundational, you could say. And his ideas offer this striking contrast to what came later. Alcmaeon hailed from Magna Graecia, what we now call southern Italy, specifically the city of Croton. Now, Croton wasn't just any city. It was a remarkable intellectual and medical hub, renowned throughout the ancient world, actually.
Really famous.
Yeah, Herodotus, the famous Greek historian, didn't just mention it in passing. He specifically lauded the physicians of Croton as the best in all of Greece.
The best, yeah.
The city itself had this legendary reputation for health and valor, attracting top minds. So Alcmaeon wasn't some isolated academic working alone. He was immersed in this vibrant intellectual ecosystem, closely connected with the Pythagorean philosophical community that flourished there, engaging with ideas about numbers, harmony, the underlying order of the cosmos.
All that Pythagorean stuff.
Exactly. But what's truly striking about Alcmaeon, and what makes him so unique, is what our texts describe as his status as a scientist across boundaries.
Across boundaries.
Who was actively working across fields that we now rigidly separate: physics, neurophysiology, epistemology, the study of knowledge, and medicine, long before these disciplines were formalized.
Yeah, that separation came much later, didn't it?
Totally.
And the very idea of categorizing Alcmaeon primarily as, say, a physician versus a natural philosopher, or physicos, as he was known, well, it's anachronistic for his era.
Right, we're putting our labels back onto him.
Exactly. Our sources point out that his work entirely predates the conceptual and professional separation of these domains. This process of division, of knowledge kind of fracturing into specialized fields, was largely accelerated by the Hippocratic school's later focus on medical practice. And crucially, by Plato's deliberate efforts to formalize philosophy into a distinct and frankly superior discipline.
Plato again.
Always Plato. Alcmaeon's predisciplinary status, as it's called, was precisely what gave him an extraordinary conceptual fluidity. It allowed him to take a concept as distinctly political as isonomia and apply it directly to the intricacies of biological health, and even to the very processes of psychological cognition. It's amazing, really.
It is amazing.
He saw the principles of cosmos, universal order, as applicable across all aspects of the natural world, from the grand movements of the heavens right down to the subtle workings of the human body. This holistic perspective, born from a unified field of inquiry, is fundamental to grasping his pre-metaphysical model.
Pre-metaphysical.
Yeah.
Before Plato carved things up?
Exactly. It truly precedes Plato's famous division of reality into sensible and intelligible realms, which, as we'll see, really laid the groundwork for the subsequent fracturing of knowledge into hierarchical disciplines. Alcmaeon's most significant innovation, the very foundation of this pre-metaphysical stance, was developing a systematic naturalistic theory of health and disease, one that utterly dispensed with divine or supernatural causation.
Which was huge back then, right? Wasn't everything blamed on the gods?
Pretty much. In a time when illness was almost universally attributed to divine wrath or malevolent spirits, like in the Homeric epics where Apollo sends plagues.
Yeah.
Alcmaeon instead posited that disease arose from purely immanent natural causes. Things like an imbalance of fundamental qualities within the body, environmental factors like diet or climate, or issues of nutrition and lifestyle.
Stuff you could actually observe and maybe influence.
Precisely. His focus was entirely on what could be observed and inferred through rational thought. As he famously stated, and this is such a key quote, "While the gods possess clear understanding, insofar as men can proceed by inference, I say as follows."
Wow. So he's saying the gods know, but here's what we can figure out.
Exactly. A crucial turning point in Western thought. A radical shift away from relying on divine revelation or mystical explanations towards rational inference and empirical observation. It laid the intellectual groundwork for understanding the body and psyche, not as vehicles for divine will, but as complex, self-regulating natural systems.
That shift is just incredible. And then how he applied it. At the very core of his naturalistic framework, he uses this powerful and honestly strikingly original political metaphor.
And a political metaphor.
He took the language of governance, the very terms used to describe how states should be run, and applied them directly to the inner workings of the human body. As the ancient doxographer Aetius records, Alcmaeon declared, "The equity isonomia of the qualities." And he lists things like wet, dry, cold, hot, bitter, sweet, and the rest.
The basic building blocks, yeah.
Is the containing cause of health. But predominance monarchia among these is the active cause of disease.
Predominance. For the predominance of either opposite produces destruction. Just think about that for a moment. This isn't just a clever turn of phrase, is it? Not just a poetic analogy.
Not at all.
It's a profound conceptual leap, integrating the fields of medicine and politics into a single, cohesive, explanatory model. He's basically saying your body is like a mini-state, and its health depends on its political constitution.
And to fully appreciate the truly radical nature of this metaphor, we need to understand the immense political weight that the term isonomia carried in the late 6th and early 5th centuries BCE.
It wasn't just a neutral term for balance or equality. Isonomia was a battle cry.
A battle cry.
Yeah. It literally meant equality of political rights or equality before the law. It was the potent slogan deeply associated with the democratic reforms of Cleisthenes in Athens, which dismantled aristocratic power, and with the broader anti-tyrannical movements across the Greek world.
So democracy and anti-tyranny.
Exactly. It explicitly denoted a non-hierarchical distributed form of power where citizens participated as equals, where no single individual or faction held absolute sway. This stood in stark opposition to monarchia, which, quite simply, meant the sole rule of a king, or even more negatively, a tyrant.
Right, the opposite.
So by applying these loaded political terms to the human body, Alcmaeon fundamentally reconceptualized the organism. It wasn't just a divinely governed vessel or a passive collection of organs. It was, as our sources suggest, a micropolity, a miniature state.
A tiny state inside you.
Yeah, comprised of rival internal powers like the humors or qualities. In this body politic, health is a dynamic state of democratic equilibrium, an ongoing active balance where no single quality or power, like hot or cold, dominates the others.
Like checks and balances.
Kind of, yeah. Disease, conversely, is a form of tyranny. It's the condition that arises when one quality, perhaps an excess of heat causing a fever to rage, or an extreme cold leading to stagnation, usurps power. It establishes a monarchy within the body, disrupting the harmonious functioning of the whole and ultimately leading to destruction.
So illness is like a coup d'etat inside the body.
That's a great way to put it. This model is inherently relational. It conceives of health not as a static absence of disease, but as a balance in motion, maintained through the managed ongoing conflict of its constituent parts.
Okay, but you mentioned there's some debate about whether he used those exact words.
Right, there is. There's a scholarly debate about whether Alcmaeon himself used these exact terms, isonomia and monarchia, or if they were what's called a Herodotism, maybe added later by a writer who was very familiar with Herodotus's famous constitutional debate.
Ah, so maybe someone else connected the dots later.
It's possible. But, and this is key, regardless of the specific origin of the terms, the profound significance of the concept remains undiminished. If Alcmaeon originated it, he was a truly radical innovator, directly importing the most politically charged language of his era into the nascent science of medicine.
Which is mind-blowing.
Totally. If the terms were added later, it demonstrates just how resonant and conceptually fitting the analogy was perceived to be, seen as the most accurate way to summarize his foundational doctrine. In either case, the fusion of these concepts became utterly inextricable in the Greek imagination. It implies a deeply held belief that a balanced, non-tyrannical order was the natural and healthy state for both the human body and the political community.
Wow. Body and state, same principle.
And the subsequent historical repression of this idea, both in political philosophy, which often favored aristocratic or even monarchical models, and in metaphysics, which sought ultimate unity, becomes this parallel and interconnected process we'll explore. It's almost as if the very idea of balance, of co-equal forces, was just too messy, too unpredictable maybe, for the philosophical mind to tolerate.
That's a truly crucial point. And to make it even clear for you, the listener, our research provides this wonderful conceptual table. It breaks down Alcmaeon's transdisciplinary analogy, showing precisely how these concepts of balance and dominance crisscross different domains. Let's walk through it. Okay, first, in the political analogy, isonomia is equal rule, democratic balance, anti-tyrannical. Everyone has a say, no single ruler. Monarchia, on the other hand, is sole rule, tyranny, one entity dominating.
Clear opposition.
Next, for the physiological state, isonomia signifies equilibrium, balance, a harmonious blending of qualities, like that perfectly tuned orchestra you mentioned. Monarchia here means imbalance, predominance, an excess or deficiency of one quality, that instrument playing way too loud.
Disrupting the harmony.
Then the constituent elements. In isonomia, we're talking opposing powers, wet-dry, hot-cold, bittersweet, existing in equal distribution, what he called isomoria. Distinct but coexisting.
Equal parts, essentially.
Monarchia, however, is when a single power achieves dominance, destroying the overall system.
One takes over.
For the governing principle. In an isonomic system, no single ruler. It's distributed, self-regulating, non-hierarchical. Balance emerges from interaction.
Self-organizing.
With monarchia, it's characterized by a single, central, and ultimately destructive ruling principle.
Top-down control that fails.
And finally, the outcome. Isonomia leads to preservation, stability, health, life, flourishing.
The good outcome.
Whereas monarchia inevitably brings destruction, illness, and ultimately death.
The bad outcome. Simple as that.
This systematic approach, though, it isn't just about the body or the state. Alcmaeon, remarkably, extended this framework into the psychological domain too, proposing a surprisingly modern view of the mind.
You've hit on a critical point there. Alcmaeon's sophisticated medical political theory finds its direct psychological correlate in his truly pioneering work in neuroscience and epistemology, the study of knowledge. He was, quite remarkably for his era, the first Greek thinker to definitively identify the brain as the central organ of sensation, intelligence, and even the soul.
The brain, not the heart.
Not the heart. This is what we now call encephalocentrism. Brain-centered. This was a profound break from virtually all competing theories of his time. Thinkers like Empedocles and later even Aristotle located consciousness and thought in the heart. cardiocentrism.
So Alcmaeon was way ahead of the curve.
Way ahead. He posited that all the sense organs, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, are connected directly to the brain through what he called poroi channels, like a network. Exactly. Our sources suggest this was likely an inference based on his own empirical investigations, maybe even dissecting animal eyes and seeing the optic nerve.
Wow, actual empirical work back then.
Seems like it. And crucially, Alcmaeon drew a fundamental distinction between mere sense perception, astenastai, just the raw data coming in, seeing color, and understanding, suniami, the ability to interpret, synthesize, and form judgments based on that data.
Perception versus understanding.
Precisely. He used this distinction to differentiate humans from other animals. While animals perceive, only humans, he argued, possess this deeper understanding, this ability to integrate sensory inputs into unified comprehension. This established one of the earliest and most influential models of cognition in Western thought. So influential, in fact, that Plato himself would later reference and adapt it in his dialogue Phaedo.
Okay, so if Alcmaeon saw the brain as this central hub connecting all the senses, what does that mean for the psyche? For mental health, in his view? If we combine his encephalocentric model with his political metaphor of isonomia, what kind of picture emerges?
A really powerful and coherent model of psychic health emerges. Yeah. In this framework, the brain isn't imagined as some tyrannical monarch dictating terms to its sensory subjects. It's not telling sight what to see or hearing what to hear.
Right.
Instead, it functions as the central locus of coordination for what we can vividly imagine as a democratic polity of the senses.
Democracy of the senses. I like that.
It fits, doesn't it? Its vital role is to bring the equal powers of sight, hearing, smell, taste into a harmonious working relationship, synthesizing their distinct inputs into a unified and meaningful comprehension of the world, like that conductor ensuring all instruments play together, not just one blaring out.
Sure.
One of Alcmaeon's most evocative fragments states that men die because they cannot join the beginning to the end.
Cannot join the beginning to the end. What does that mean?
Well, it can be interpreted directly as a profound failure of this synthesizing, coordinating function within the brain. It's not a failure of a single ruler, but a breakdown of the dynamic equilibrium. The system isn't connecting things properly.
Failure of integration.
Exactly. Therefore, psychic health, according to Alcmaeon, is the successful maintenance of this isonomic state within the mind-brain system. It's the balanced and equitable integration of multiple sensory and cognitive faculties. No single sense or thought dominates. They all work together.
And psychic illness, then?
By extension, psychic illness would be a state of monarchia. The unchecked dominance of one sense over the others, maybe the tyranny of a single obsessive passion or an unshakable belief, or even a literal breakdown in those connective poroi, those channels, disrupting the balanced coordination, resulting in a fractured, disordered consciousness, an internal tyranny.
A tyranny within the mind.
Precisely. And this isonomic model, this vision of a democratic and balanced psyche, stands in stark and truly consequential contrast to the hierarchical models of the psyche that would eventually come to dominate Western philosophy.
Right, the ones that came later, like Plato's.
Exactly. The most influential of these, of course, is Plato's tripartite soul, a model that shaped centuries of thought. Plato explicitly designates reason, or logistikon, as the rightful monarch, the king.
Reason as king.
Whose duty it is to rule over the two lower, potentially rebellious parts of the soul. The spirited part, courage, honor, and the appetitive part, desires, passions.
The military and the populace, you said earlier.
That's the analogy, yes. For Plato, a just and healthy soul is not an isonomia of its parts, not a dynamic balance of equals, no. It's rather a rigid, well-ordered monarchy where reason holds absolute sway.
Total control from the top.
Total control. Alcmaeon's model, therefore, is not merely an alternative historical footnote that was simply forgotten. From our Europanalytic perspective, as we'll explore more deeply, it is the repressed other of the entire Platonic philosophical tradition.
The repressed other? That sounds significant.
It is the historical move away from Alcmaeon's distributed, relational, balanced conception of the psyche towards a centralized, hierarchical, monarchic one. It's not simply a shift in physical or political theory. It represents a fundamental restructuring of the very concept of the soul itself, determining what psychic health even means.
Changing the definition of a healthy mind.
Exactly. And this restructuring would profoundly define the trajectory of Western metaphysics, ethics, psychology for millennia. It's almost as if the very idea of a healthy, balanced multiplicity was somehow intolerable, leading to this compulsive need for a single ruling principle.
That's a powerful statement. Alcmaeon's vision as the repressed other. It suggests a fork in the road, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where Western philosophy made a fundamental choice. Okay, let's shift gears then. Let's trace the path away from Alcmaeon's revolutionary vision. Let's see how this monarchic principle truly ascended and came to dominate Western thought, becoming its defining characteristic. Our sources suggest that the philosophical tradition that followed the pre-Socratics, well, it can be read as a systematic, almost unconscious flight, a flight from the anxieties of a world governed by balanced, immanent, often conflicting forces.
The messiness you mentioned.
Yeah, imagine living in a world where everything is in dynamic, shifting balance. Without a fixed ultimate authority, it could feel unsettling.
Definitely unsettling for some thinkers.
The isonomic model, which accepted a reality of irreducible difference and ongoing dynamic antagonism without a final arbiter or king, it was gradually pushed aside, almost deemed too messy, too unstable.
Right.
It was replaced by systems that promised ultimate unity, unshakable certainty, and absolute order under the command of a single sovereign principle. This isn't just a preference for monarchy in a state. This desire for monarchia is described as a deep-seated metaphysical impulse.
A metaphysical drive.
Yeah, a drive so fundamental it shapes how reality itself is conceived. To subordinate the many to the one, it's a recurring symptom in the history of Western thought, a kind of philosophical defense mechanism against a perceived chaos or unpredictability of a world without a king at its conceptual core.
And this symptomatic history truly begins, as you mentioned, with Plato. His philosophy represents the decisive and most influential break from the pre-Socratic worldview, a break that would echo through centuries.
Okay, Plato's the turning point.
He really is, reacting to what he perceived as the ceaseless flux of the Heraclitean physical world, that idea that everything is constantly changing, you can't step in the same river twice, making true knowledge impossible.
Right, the flux.
And the pervasive relativism of the sophists, who questioned absolute truth and argued all beliefs were just opinions. Plato institutes a two-world metaphysics that is inherently hierarchical and, yes, deeply monarchic.
Two worlds.
Two worlds. He posits a transcendent realm of eternal, unchanging forms, perfect blueprints, if you will, as the true reality, while the sensible physical world we inhabit is merely a debased, imperfect, chaotic copy.
So perfect, unchanging world above, messy, changing world below.
Exactly. This establishes a fundamental opposition between the singular, stable, perfect truth of the intelligible world and the disordered, multiple, transient nature of the physical world. And at the very apex of this entire structure, as magnificently described in his Republic, stands the form of the good.
The form of the good, the ultimate king.
The ultimate monarchic principle, yes. It isn't just the highest form among equals, it's the transcendent source of all being and all knowledge. Effectively the king of the intelligible realm that gives reality to all other forms and makes them knowable.
Like the source of everything.
Exactly. Plato uses the analogy of the sun. Just as the sun illuminates our physical world and makes things visible, the form of the good illuminates the world of thought, making concepts intelligible and granting them their very existence. This, as our sources clearly articulate, is a direct and explicit philosophical instantiation of monarchia, replacing Alcmaeon's immanent balance with a transcendent absolute hierarchy.
And what's so striking, almost chilling in its precision, is that this metaphysical monarchy in Plato's thought, it's mirrored precisely in his model of the soul, which we touched on earlier.
Exactly the same structure.
For Plato, the just soul is not an isonomia of its parts, not a democratic collaboration of faculties, but a true psychic monarchy. Reason, logistikon, is designated as the rightful king. Its divine, unshakable task is to rule absolutely over the lower, potentially rebellious parts, spirit and appetite.
King, military, populace.
Justice and psychic health, in this Platonic framework, are achieved only when this strict hierarchy is maintained. Each part does its own work under reason's absolute command, like a well-ordered state where everyone knows their place.
No deviation allowed.
This model, our sources tell us, directly represses Alcmaeon's earlier, much more fluid vision of psychic health as a coordinated balance of co-equal faculties.
Pushes it right out.
Yet despite this systematic repression, what's truly fascinating is that Plato's work contains clear echoes of the very isonomic ideas he subordinates. You mentioned this.
Yes, the echoes are there.
For example, in the Timaeus, Plato describes bodily disease as arising from an imbalance or undue proportion of the primary elements: fire, air, water, earth. That sounds a lot like Alcmaeon's balance of qualities. It really does. A clear resonance.
And even more pointedly, in the Phaedo, Socrates explicitly considers and adapts Alcmaeon's encephalocentric model. discussing how the brain receives sensations that then give rise to memory, opinion, knowledge.
He engages with it directly.
It's almost as if he had to contend with Alcmaeon's idea before rejecting its core principle of balance, right?
That's precisely what the analysis suggests. The presence of these echoes is absolutely crucial. It demonstrates that Plato was not simply ignorant of the alternative isonomic model. Instead, it suggests he made a deliberate choice to reject its non-hierarchical implications, subordinating the concept of dynamic balance to the overriding principle of monarchic rule by a single transcendent source.
It's a conscious choice. Arguably, yes. This choice truly established the foundational grammar for much of the subsequent metaphysical tradition in the West. It ingrained the idea that order comes from hierarchy, from a single guiding principle, rather than from dynamic distributed balance. Now, let's fast forward a bit through the philosophical lineage. Even though Aristotle famously rejected Plato's two-world metaphysics, brought philosophy back down to earth, focusing on the immanent physical world.
Right. Aristotle was more empirical.
More empirical, yes. But he still did not abandon this deep-seated desire for a monarchic principle. He simply established his own version, albeit in a different, arguably more subtle form.
That's right. It's almost as if once this monarchic seed was planted, it just kept growing and adapting, even when philosophers thought they were moving in entirely new directions. Let's see how this relentless drive towards the one continued, first with Aristotle, and then making that dramatic shift into the modern era with Descartes.
Okay, Aristotle. At the pinnacle of his cosmology, his understanding of the universe stands what he calls the prime mover, or the unmoved mover.
The unmoved mover.
This principle is not a physical being in the world. It's a singular, perfect, eternal entity, pure actuality, meaning it's perfectly realized, no potential for change. It serves as the ultimate cause of all motion and change in the universe. But here's the key twist compared to Plato.
Okay.
It moves all other things, not through physical contact or direct intervention, but rather as an object of desire or aspiration.
Moves things by being desirable. How'd that work?
Imagine a beloved person who inspires others to act, not by commanding them, but simply by being desirable, by being admirable. The entire cosmos, in a sense, strives towards the prime mover's perfection, seeking to imitate its pure actuality.
So everything is sort of drawn towards it.
Exactly. The prime mover is a non-reciprocal cause. It acts upon everything, but is itself affected by nothing. It is, in essence, a pure self-thinking thought, absorbed in its own perfection, ruling the cosmos from the apex of a vast teleological hierarchy.
Teleological meaning purposeful, goal-oriented.
Yes, everything moving towards this ultimate goal. Our sources describe it as a perfect and solitary monarch, unmoved, untouched, yet the ultimate source of all movement and order. Unlike Plato's form of the good, which exists in a separate realm, Aristotle's prime mover is the culmination of the natural world's own striving, but still, a singular, supreme principle. Still a monarch.
Still a monarch. Okay, and then the modern philosophical turn, dramatically inaugurated by René Descartes. You said he perfected this monarchic principle by internalizing it, bringing it right inside us.
Exactly, a huge shift inward.
Faced with the widespread skepticism of his era, a time when traditional authorities were crumbling, doubt seemed everywhere, Descartes sought an unshakable point of certainty, an absolute foundation upon which all knowledge could be built.
The Archimedean point.
Right. He famously found it not in the external world or even in God initially, but rather in the self-sufficient thinking subject itself. His iconic Cogito, I think, therefore I am, becomes the new monarch.
The I takes the throne.
It is this single, unified, self-certain consciousness that serves as the absolute foundation for all knowledge. The very existence of the external world, the laws of science, the reliability of our senses, even God's benevolence. They're only secured, in Descartes' system, through their logical relation to this central thinking sovereign.
Wow. Everything depends on the I think.
This subject, in effect, becomes the legislator of the real, meaning our mind doesn't just perceive reality, it actively structures and grounds it. This was a radical break, making the individual conscious I the ultimate authority.
And this Cartesian move had profound and lasting consequences, didn't it? Fundamentally reshaping our understanding of ourselves and our place in the world. Descartes' substance dualism defining mind, res cogitans thinking substance, and body, res extensa extended material substance, as two fundamentally different separate substances, created a stark and enduring hierarchy between them.
Mind over body.
Absolutely. The mind, as the seat of the monarchic Cogito, is privileged. It's the locus of identity, truth, genuine being, while the body is reduced to a mere mechanical apparatus, devoid of inherent intelligence or purpose. just matter in motion.
Like a machine the mind inhabits.
Pretty much. This philosophical decision effectively shattered the holistic, integrated model of the human being we saw in Alcmaeon, where the mind-brain coordinated a living, organic whole intrinsically connected to the body.
Right. Alcmaeon's model was integrated.
The Cartesian legacy, then, is not just about a separation of mind and body. It's about a fractured subject and a world subordinated to the rule of a solitary, thinking king, the individual consciousness. This creates the infamous mind-body problem. How can these two distinct substances even interact, a problem that continues to plague philosophy?
And if that wasn't enough centralization, this relentless philosophical desire for Monarchia reaches its absolute apotheosis, its ultimate culmination, in the grand sweeping system of Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel.
Ah, Hegel, the grand synthesizer.
If Plato established the monarchy of the transcendent form, a king beyond the world, and Descartes established the monarchy of the immanent subject, a king within each of us, Hegel established something even grander, more totalizing, the monarchy of the historical process itself, conceived as a single, self-realizing, all-encompassing entity, which he called the absolute spirit.
The absolute spirit, yes. In Hegel's philosophy, reality is rational, and the rational is real. This isn't just a clever saying. It means there's no fundamental difference between thought and being. Everything that exists is ultimately a manifestation of thought, of spirit.
Mind is reality.
Essentially, yes. History, for Hegel, is not a series of contingent, disconnected events. It's the grand, necessary, and dialectical unfolding of the absolute spirit's own self-consciousness.
Dialectical. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
Exactly that process. This system represents the most totalizing and absolute expression of the monarchic principle we've encountered. It leaves absolutely no room for the kind of irreducible, balanced antagonism that defined Alcmaeon's isonomia, where different forces could coexist in dynamic tension without one dominating.
No room for democracy here.
None at all. For Hegel,
No.
All opposition, all difference, all contradiction, a thesis opposing an antithesis, are merely temporary moments within a larger process of synthesis. This conflict does not persist in the state of equilibrium like Alcmaeon's model. No, it is necessarily overcome and sublated. Aufgehoben in German.
Sublated. What does that mean again?
To sublate means to negate something while simultaneously preserving and elevating it into a higher, more complex form. Think of it like this. A seed, thesis, sprouts, antithesis, negating the seed's form. The resulting plant synthesis doesn't destroy the seed. It incorporates its essence and transforms it into something greater.
Okay, so conflict leads to progress, basically.
In Hegel's view, yes. This dialectical engine drives history forward, relentlessly subsuming all particularity and finitude into the ever-expanding unity of the absolute. At what Hegel called the end of history, all of reality is revealed to have been nothing but the autobiography of this single, all-encompassing subject, the absolute spirit fully conscious of itself.
The universe becomes self-aware.
Through history, yes. The monarchic rule of the concept of this unfolding idea is total and absolute. There is no remainder, no outside, no co-equal power that can challenge its reign. Our sources tell us that Alcmaeon's isonomic world, with its inherent multiplicity and dynamic balance, is not just repressed in the system, it is philosophically annihilated.
Annihilated. Strong word.
Exposed as a mere illusion, a less developed, incomplete stage of consciousness that must be transcended, must be sublated. Hegel's system, then, is the ultimate triumph of the one over the many. The final, most ambitious attempt to secure the world against contingency by making it the necessary product of a single, sovereign, self-realizing mind. It's an intellectual empire with no room for rebellious provinces.
Wow. From Alcmaeon's vision of balanced harmony to Hegel's totalizing absolute, what an incredible, almost relentless journey of intellectual centralization. So if we've traced this persistent drive towards the one, how do we make sense of it? How do we diagnose this pattern? This is where we introduce our diagnostic tool, right? That fascinating concept from 20th century French thought, François Wahl and his concept of Europanalyse.
Yes, Europanalyze.
That kind of psychoanalytic method applied not to an individual patient, but to the entire history of European thought.
Exactly. Wahl is a truly pivotal figure, and his intellectual significance cannot be separated from his institutional role. He wasn't just a philosopher in an ivory tower. He was a leading editor at Editions du Seuil from 1957 to 1991, one of the most prestigious publishing houses in France.
So he was right in the thick of things.
Absolutely. This meant he wasn't just a commentator on the intellectual currents of his time. He was, in a very real sense, one of their primary conduits, helping to shape and propagate the ideas that defined an era. He even co-founded the prestigious L'Ordre Philosophique collection with Paul Ricoeur.
The philosophical order. The irony.
The irony is profound, yes, given Wahl's later critique. Through this powerful position, he became, as our sources vividly describe him, the obstinate obstetrician for some of the most important and challenging texts of French theory, editing foundational works by giants like Jacques Lacan.
They'll call him the psychoanalyst.
The very one. Also, Jacques Derrida, Roland Barthes, Michel Foucault, Philippe Sollers. He was instrumental in the rise of structuralism.
Wow, that's a list.
It really is.
Yeah.
Wahl's own intellectual trajectory mirrors the key shifts in post-war French thought. Trained as a philosopher, he moved from phenomenology through structuralism to a later mature phase, critically returning to phenomenology with Alain Badiou. But what's truly crucial here, and what gives his Europanalyse its unique edge, is how profoundly his path was informed by psychoanalysis. Wahl was a former analysand of Jacques Lacan himself.
He was Lacan's patient.
Yes. This direct, personal, practical understanding of psychoanalytic theory gave Wahl an unparalleled insight into its concepts, its critique of the conscious subject. It allowed him to see patterns of repression and symptom formation not just in individuals, but across entire intellectual traditions.
Applying therapy concepts to history.
In a sophisticated way, yes. This unique combination of philosophy, editorial power, structuralism, psychoanalysis positioned him perfectly to develop a critique not just of a single system, but of the philosophical project itself as it manifested in Europe.
That's an incredible vantage point. So for us, the listener, trying to understand what Wahl calls the malaise of Europe, this deep-seated unease, how does Europanalyse actually define itself? What are its core insights?
Okay, our sources, drawing from Wahl's thought, as articulated by his collaborator Serge Valdenoci, define Europanalyse as both a new method and a new conceptual framework, akin to psychoanalysis for approaching what it calls the real.
The real, Lacan's concept.
Exactly. And remember, the real here isn't just everyday reality. It's the raw, unsymbolizable, often traumatic core of existence that resists being fully captured by language or rational thought. It's what lies beyond our attempts to name and categorize.
The ungraspable stuff.
Pretty much. The core of Wahl's method rests on a few key principles. First, Europanalyse posits that Europe is a unique cultural formation whose defining a priori, its fundamental precondition, its DNA is philosophy. Philosophy, according to this view, isn't just one activity among others in Europe. It is its fundamental infrastructure, its unique way of organizing its relationship to the world and knowledge, the lens through which Europe processes reality.
Okay, Europe is philosophy in a way.
In a fundamental way, yes. Second, and this is where the psychoanalytic bit really comes in, this philosophical apparatus operates through a specific and indeed violent mechanism.
Violent? How so?
It functions by the violent removal and isolation of a problematic of knowledge charged to rule over the real. What this means is that philosophy, in its attempt to make sense of the world, forcibly carves out a domain of knowable reality, establishing principles and categories that then claim to govern or explain everything.
Imposing its order.
Exactly. This, Wahl argues, constitutes a work denying the authority of the real, a deliberate act of conceptual suppression, which in turn creates a deep cultural malaise, a profound intentional echo of Freud's civilization and its discontents.
The unhappiness caused by repression.
Precisely. In this diagnosis, philosophy with a capital P is presented as a vast, historically constituted system of repression. Its primary, though often unconscious, function is to substitute a structured, rational, controllable conceptual order, what Lacan calls the symbolic order.
Language, rules, shared meanings.
Right. Substitute that symbolic order for the unstructured, contingent, and unmasterable real. Think of it like a perfectly paved road over a wild, untamed landscape. The symbolic order tries to pave over the traumatic real, impose order and meaning.
But the wildness is still underneath.
Exactly. The real, by its nature, resists full symbolization. It constantly threatens to return, to burst through the cracks in that pavement, manifesting as symptoms, anxieties, contradictions, both in individual psyches and, in Wahl's daring extension, in the very history of European thought itself.
So philosophy creates symptoms.
Wall's Europanalyse transposes this psychoanalytic insight. It treats the entire Western philosophical tradition as a grand symbolic construct, whose ultimate, unspoken purpose is to manage the anxiety provoked by the real.
Wow. Okay, so this desire for monarchia that we've been tracing Plato's good, Aristotle's mover, Descartes' Cogito, Hegel's absent. How does Europanalyse diagnose that specifically within this psychoanalytic framework? What's the true meaning of this pattern?
From the diagnostic perspective of Europanalyse, the desire for monarchia is revealed as the primary and recurring symptom of the entire European philosophical tradition.
The main symptom.
The main symptom. It's not just a historical preference or intellectual fashion. It's a compulsive repetition of a foundational act of repression. It's as if philosophy cannot help but try to impose a single ultimate authority again and again.
A compulsion.
Yes. The installation of a master signifier, whether it's Plato's good, Aristotle's God, Descartes' Cogito, Hegel's absolute, is, in this view, the philosophical equivalent of a defense mechanism. Each metaphysical system, with its sovereign central principle, is an elaborate attempt to guarantee order, to provide a final, unshakable foundation, and, critically, to deny the unstructured, unpredictable real that lies beyond its conceptual grasp.
Trying to control the uncontrollable.
Exactly. It's philosophy trying to convince itself, and us, that everything can ultimately be mastered by a single supreme idea. Wall's own philosophical writings, like Philosophy or Introduction au discours du tableau, can be read as practical applications of this critique. They aren't just commentaries. They're exercises in trying to think outside this monarchic compulsion, to find alternative modes of understanding.
How did he do that? Like with painting?
Yeah, for example, in his analysis of painting, he argues against the traditional view that a painting needs a single, overriding meaning dictated by some external authority or hidden message. Instead, he posits that the visible object within a painting produces its own immanent discourse, a complex web of internal relations between colors, shapes, figures. This web generates meaning without needing a single transcendent meaning or a sovereign interpreting subject to make it intelligible.
Meaning comes from the relationships within the painting.
Exactly. Meaning resides in these immanent relational structures, not in a top-down hierarchy. His thought consistently seeks to locate meaning within these distributed relational structures rather than in a singular transcendent one.
And this project, this powerful critique of philosophical monarchy, it sounds like it's very much in conversation with other major critical currents of the 20th century, reaching far beyond just Wahl himself.
It absolutely is. Wall's critique resonates strongly with Michel Foucault's famous assertion in political theory that we have not yet cut off the head of the king.
Right, Foucault on power and sovereignty.
Precisely. A profound critique of the lingering paradigms of sovereignty and centralized power that still inform our thinking, even in supposedly democratic societies. It aligns perfectly with Jacques Derrida's groundbreaking project of deconstruction, which systematically dismantles what he called the metaphysics of presence, showing how Western thought has consistently privileged a central term, like speech over writing, presence over absence, and built hierarchical oppositions around it.
Dismantling those hierarchies.
It also connects to Alain Badiou's ambitious attempt to formulate a philosophy based on the contingent, unpredictable event rather than a pre-existing, substantial, unified subject.
Badiou and the event.
These thinkers, in their different ways, are all grappling with the same underlying problem, the philosophical drive towards a singular, totalizing authority. Ultimately, Europanalyse is not an external attack on philosophy, not a dismissal from the outside.
It's working from within.
Exactly. It's a profound form of philosophical autoanalysis. As a classically trained philosopher himself, Wahl uses the most rigorous tools of the European tradition, phenomenology, structural linguistics, psychoanalysis, to turn them back upon the tradition itself. The method daringly treats the entire corpus of Western philosophy, from ancient Greece to the modern era, as the speech of a single patient. Europe.
Philosophy is Europe's therapy session transcript.
In a manner of speaking, yes. By analyzing the patterns, repetitions, structuring absences in this speech, Europanalyse aims to uncover the foundational repression that gives rise to the philosophical malaise, that compulsion for a single ruling principle. The ultimate gesture of Europanalyse is to force philosophy's own desire for monarchia, its relentless drive for totalizing sovereign explanation to confront the one thing it cannot rule. The contingent, non-totalizable, and fundamentally isonomic real that Alcmaeon's pre-metaphysical model was, perhaps, more willing to accept, even embrace, maybe, in its messy, dynamic equilibrium.
Wow. Forcing philosophy to face the unrulable reality it tried to suppress.
That's the aim. So to synthesize our wide-ranging discussion in this episode, this Europanalytic diagnosis has traced a symptomatic lineage through the history of Western thought, arguing that a foundational model of health and order was repressed at the very genesis of the philosophical tradition.
Alcmaeon's isonomia.
Alcmaeon's isonomia. Dynamic, non-hierarchical equilibrium of co-equal opposing forces, a pre-metaphysical model of distributed order applicable to body, psyche, polity, embracing permanent, balanced antagonism without a sovereign ruler.
The road not taken, basically.
You could see it that way. The subsequent history of Western metaphysics, Plato, Aristotle, Descartes, Hegel, can be read as the history of the symptom formation resulting from the repression of this model. This symptom is precisely the desire for monarchia, that compulsive philosophical need to install a single, central, sovereign principle to guarantee unity and certainty against multiplicity and contingency.
The recurring need for a king.
Exactly. And François Wahl's Europanalyse provides us with the critical and psychoanalytic framework to diagnose this desire as the core defining mechanism of a philosophical tradition that ultimately functions to deny or control the unmasterable real.
Which brings us directly to today. So what does this all mean for us now, living in the 21st century? From this unique Europanalytic perspective, much of 20th century French critical thought, which profoundly influenced so many fields, as you know, can be understood as a powerful return of the repressed.
The repressed isonomia coming back.
Kind of. Think about the widespread critiques of the sovereign unified subject, of logocentrism privileging reason and language as ultimate truth and the metaphysics of presence, of totalizing historical narratives, of centralized structures of power.
All those big themes of postmodern thought.
Exactly. These critiques, as found in the monumental works of Foucault, Derrida, Deleuze, and indeed Wahl himself, they're not just random intellectual trends. All of these, in their own unique ways, represent a rediscovery of the necessity for an isonomic mode of thinking, a way of engaging with the world that moves beyond the desire for a single king.
Thinking without a monarch.
Yeah. They are a collective, multidisciplinary effort to dismantle the philosophical monarchies of the past and to develop conceptual tools capable of engaging with difference, multiplicity, balanced antagonism, without clinging to the false security of a transcendent absolute or a central controlling principle.
And the contemporary relevance of this recovered isonomic model is profound, isn't it? Extending far beyond the halls of philosophy, making it highly applicable to so many areas of your life and study, listener.
Like where? Give us some examples.
Okay. In political philosophy, for instance, it offers a deep historical and philosophical grounding for modern theories of radical democracy, theories that advocate for constant contestation and renegotiation of power, or agonistic pluralism embracing ongoing productive conflict rather than seeking ultimate consensus.
So embracing the tension instead of trying to resolve it completely.
Precisely. It supports decentralized, network-like forms of organization, challenging the classic top-down model of state sovereignty. Then, think about ecological thought. The isonomic principle of a healthy system as a dynamic equilibrium of competing forces. It resonates powerfully with our contemporary understandings of ecosystems.
Nature is a balance of forces.
Right. It provides a model for thinking about sustainability and planetary health, not as a static, managed hierarchy, where humans perhaps act as the monarchic ruler over nature.
Humans as eco-kings.
Yeah, moving away from that idea. Thinking instead about a complex web of balanced, interdependent relationships, where all elements contribute to a dynamic equilibrium.
More democratic, less monarchic ecology.
You could say that. And even in psychoanalysis and psychology, it supports a continued critique of the ego as a monarchic ruler of the psyche, advocating instead for models that view the self as a multiplicity of drives, relations, self-states.
The self isn't just one thing.
Exactly. Where true psychological health is a function of integration and balance among these diverse parts, rather than centralized authoritarian control by a single dominant ego. It's about letting the whole symphony play, not just the trumpets.
Integration, not domination.
Yeah.
Okay. It seems, then, that the fundamental challenge first articulated by Alcmaeon's radical metaphor, that idea of a healthy balance without a king, and later diagnosed as such piercing insight by Wahl's critical analysis, it remains as urgent and relevant as ever.
It really does.
It is a challenge to truly think, to organize, and maybe even to live in a world of irreducible complexity and difference, to build healthy bodies, healthy psyches, and healthy polities without the comforting yet ultimately limiting presence of a single sovereign ruler.
A challenge indeed.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of AI History of Western Philosophy. Here's something for you, our listener, to mull over. How might this subtle, often unconscious desire for monarchia manifest in the seemingly non-philosophical aspects of your own life, or in the very structures and institutions you encounter every day? And conversely, what would it truly look like and feel like to embrace an isonomic way of being in your own understanding of the world? Food for thought.